Hello Hastings, I'm Tom Wright. Welcome back up to the state capitol. This time we're here to talk to your representative in the House, Mr. Tony Jurgens.
Hi, Tom.
How you doing?
Good, how are you? Thanks for coming up to see us. I appreciate that.
Pleasure. It's good to be here. Good to see you as always. Here to talk to you, catch up on all the things going on here at the Capitol. I know you've been busy with some bills, and we want to hear all about that and get your perspective on some things as well. But for those at home watching, Mr. Jurgens here is on his third term, and second term, but third year in the session. That's right, second term, third session, and representing 54B, which covers Hastings, Ninninger Township, Cottage Grove, Denmark Township, Afton, and did I get them all?
That's it. That's it. About a third or so of Cottage Grove in there. Yes.
Awesome, got them all there. Mr. Jurgens also serves on 3 committees: the Capital Investment Division, Education Finance Division, and we were just talking about your new assignment this year, Housing Finance and Policy Division.
Yes. And
we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. But first of all, Representative, I'd like to just hear overall in general, how are things going this year in 2019?
Well, right now we're hitting a busy time of year. You know, early on in session, we spend most of our time in committees. You mentioned the 3 committees that I'm on, the Capital Investment Committee, Education, Finance, and Housing. And most of our time we spend in committee meetings. We spend a little bit of time on the House floor. Most of what we do there is procedural. It's called a paper push because the procedures say that each bill has to be heard or introduced on the floor 3 times. And so a lot of times we just go to the floor for the procedural the motions. Most of the time is in committee meetings. About halfway through, and we're at that point now, the committee work is pretty much wrapped up and the bills are being combined. The different individual bills are being combined into omnibus bills. In some cases, omnibus bills for different committees are combined into one larger omnibus bill. And now those bills are being heard on the House floor. So for example, we were on the House floor yesterday debating one bill from 11 in the morning until midnight. Wow. No, I shouldn't say that. We did finish up that bill at somewhere in the evening, and then we started a second bill. So I can't remember what time we voted, but we were on the House floor until midnight. And it looked like we were going to be there all night, but then they decided to break at midnight, and we came back at 9 o'clock this morning. And again, we're hearing omnibus bills, and I'm sure we'll go till midnight, probably every night this week.
Wow, lots of pizza delivering going on here?
There was some pizza last night, yes.
Yes. Well, and what are the items that is taking so long in the House that you guys are spending so much time on?
Well, when it comes to the omnibus bills, you have a lot of floor amendments, and the omnibus bills that we're hearing right now all have 80 to 100 or sometimes more than 100 amendments. In some cases, it's an amendment to the amendment. Anybody can offer an amendment. There are deadlines when they have to be introduced. But anybody could offer the amendment, and then once those amendments are up, anybody else can offer an amendment to that amendment. And each one could be very brief with no discussion, or an amendment could be, a couple hours worth of debate. It all just depends on what the topic is and what people feel like they want to say in publicly.
Well, let's get to some specific bills for Hastings, benefit Hastings. I know we've got we'll start at the transportation bill with Hastings Trunk Highway 316 and Highway 61, as well as the River Trail Bikeway. Can you give us an update on where those stand right now?
Yeah, well, the House came out with the bonding bill a couple of weeks ago. It's a $1.5 billion bonding bill, and there are 2 Hastings projects that are in there. Highway 316 is included, and so is the City Hall restoration for the dome. The 316 portion of it has to do with its funding for the trail portion, which is all that we could borrow for, all that we could bond for. And so I was glad to see that is in the bill. I don't think that bonding bill I'm certain that bonding bill is not going to stay at the size that it is right now. It's at $1.5 billion. This isn't even a bonding year. It's a budget year. Typically, next year would be the bonding bill year. So there may be a bonding bill this year, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere near $1.5 billion. So my work is cut out for me now to make sure that I keep those Hastings projects in that bill as it potentially shrinks down in size. If we had a $1.5 billion bill and those projects weren't in, it'd be almost impossible to have those added as the bill comes down in size. So it's a necessary first step to get the projects in the bill. I'll be continue to to work with the chair of the committee and other members of the committee to be able to keep those projects in, should there be a bonding bill this year. And it's very possible that no bonding bill is passed this year, and what we're doing with those projects is setting us up for next year.
Is there anybody at home that's very animate on those? Is there anybody they can call or email to bug them to get this thing passed?
Well, you can always try, but for the most part, at this point, it has to do with me whispering in the ear of the chair every time I see her. And I did that last year on the bills that we had. Of course, we have got funding for the Hero Center in Cottage Grove, which is a law enforcement or first responder training center, almost $10 million. And that's what it took with that project. Every time I had the opportunity, I would talk to the chair of the committee and other members and say, don't forget about the Hero Center. We have the Hastings City Hall project last year. We had the Capital Investment Committee came and toured it. I wasn't able to get that in the bill last year, so that's one of our focuses this year, along with the Highway 316 trail.
As you mentioned, it's a budget year. Tell us where does the state budget stand right now, and give your perspective on it, your thoughts on where it is.
So we have a fair amount of work that we have to do in the next 5 weeks, and it's not so much the amount of work, because we've done that before. We can get these bills done fairly quickly. The concerning part is the difference between, there's a large gap between the House bills and the Senate bills. The House is the majority, the Democrats are in control in the House and the Republicans in control in the Senate. The Democrats are looking at vast increases in spending and in tax increases, and the Republicans in the Senate are not. So there's a big difference between the two, and that's the more concerning part that makes me wonder how we're going to get that done in the next 5 weeks. But again, it's not so much the amount of work, it's just the differences in the bills right now. So as we pass our omnibus bills, whether it's education or jobs and energy or housing or whatever it is, the Senate's doing the same. And those bills are going to be different. So what happens is then the House bill and the Senate bill being different, they will convene a conference committee, and they will work out the differences and try to come to some sort of a consensus. And then both bodies would need to pass that bill and have it signed by the governor. So there's quite a few steps before we'd actually get to that point. Like again, because of the difference, if we were closer together, I'd be a little bit more optimistic that we can get it done in a timely manner, but given the difference, it's going to be a challenge. Eventually we will, because we're constitutionally dedicated or required to do so, so we will. Eventually we're going to be bumping up against that deadline.
And how far apart are the two parties right now?
Well, it depends on which bill you're talking about,
sure.
But each bill is different, and there's a vast, like for example, we talked about the bonding bill. And the House bonding bill is $1.5 billion. The Senate doesn't even have a bill. And they're talking about, if there is one, it might be in the $200 million range. So that's a big difference between $1.5 billion and $200 million. And so, and it's fairly similar as you look at the other bills as well, of what the differences are. Tax increases or no tax increases, spending here. For example, in the Education Finance Committee, or rather the Education Omnibus Bill, it calls for new spending, and the only place we can get that new spending is in the tax bill. So part of that is assuming that there's going to be a 20-cent gas tax, and then take money that's currently dedicated to transportation through auto parts sales tax and move that into the general fund and use it for education. So there's some shifting going on there. And if any one of those dominoes falls apart, then everything else around it is going to fall. So it's actually like putting together a jigsaw puzzle in the end. And actually we have two different puzzles when you have the House and the Senate, and trying to get those both together. Speaking
of which, so as you mentioned, you have Democrats have the hold of the House, and you have Republicans the hold of the Senate. Mm-hmm. How's that created? What kind of culture has that created here up at the state capitol?
I've gotten along real well with members of the majority party since I've been here, and I think it's shown. I've gotten some of my bills heard. I've gotten some of my provisions included in omnibus bills. Had some amendments on the floor yesterday in a bill, the education bill, that were accepted. So, you have to be able to play well with others. You have to be able to, I've said before many times that this is a team sport, and you could have the greatest idea in the world, but if you don't have the respect of your colleagues, it's not going to go anywhere. So you have to be able to work with members of not only your own party, but the other party as well, because the longer you're here, if you're here for any extended period of time, there's going to be a time when your party's in the majority and a time when your party's in the minority. And if you want to get things done, then you have to be able to build those relationships. And I think I have. Again, only starting my second term, we were in the majority the first time I was here. I spent a lot of that time just learning. And now that I've been here into the second term, I'm a little more apt to move forward with some of my bills or amendments. And like I said, I've been able to get them heard and get some of the provisions included in the bills.
I'd like to delve into that a little bit more, comparing this year compared to your very first year. I mean, would you put it as like drinking water through a fire hose that first year?
Absolutely, no question. And we still are. I've talked to other members who've been here a while, and they said that they didn't feel like they really understood how this place works until about their 6th year. I'm just starting my 3rd year, so I think I figured out a lot of how to work things and how to get things done. But there's always going to be more learning to do, and I don't think that ever changes or ever stops, which is a good thing. But it's definitely it has been a learning experience. I've talked to others before, just some of the procedural things that you and I were talking about before we started, and the bills and amendments, and I didn't know any of that stuff when I started. I mean, I had to learn all of it because following the legislature is not something I ever did prior to coming here. So the whole process of how to introduce a bill or how to introduce an amendment or how to get it heard, you have to ask the chair of the committee for a hearing. And so that was all new to me. I think I'm getting the hang of it now and working towards actually, getting some work accomplished. I had a bill last year that was school lunch shaming. I got it heard, I got it into the omnibus bill, and it passed off the House, passed off the Senate, and it was in the omnibus bill that Governor Dayton vetoed. So this year I took the same exact language and I started all over with it. Again, that's in the omnibus bill that passed off of the House floor, so I'm hopeful that we'll get that across the finish line this year. And a lot of times that's what it takes. You have bills that sometimes take years and years to get done. And some of it's because you're working through the process and you're refining it every year too. Maybe you didn't quite get something passed and you keep talking to different stakeholders and people that are interested in it and figure out a better way to do it. Government's not intended to move fast. It isn't intended to move slowly so that you hopefully get it right. And so sometimes it takes a series of years of working on the same bill and refining it before you get it to where it's good enough to pass.
You're seen around the district at many events. We run into each other all the time. So I have a question of mine is, what do you hear when you're out and about from your constituents right now? What are the hot topics that you get approached?
A lot of people are concerned about the gas tax, the 20-cent gas tax. People realize that the Department of Transportation needs dedicated funding. We have that now through the motor vehicle sales tax, or the auto parts sales tax that we talked about. And we want to keep that. That's not going to fully fund transportation, but it gives MnDOT an idea of what they can expect on a yearly basis from that. And so I think that needs to stay in place rather than shifting that back over to the general fund and implementing a 70% increase in Minnesota's gas tax, which would put us in the top 4 in the nation for a gas tax. So I hear some concern about that and what that would do to people's household incomes. Because again, it's not just a gas tax, but it's also an increase in your license tab. So you get your license tabs. Minnesota's already paying more than, say, Wisconsin for license tabs, and part of the proposal would be to increase that and also increase the motor vehicle sales tax. So getting in 3 different places to increase taxes. So we have a budget surplus. It's $1 billion. We've had a surplus for the last couple of years. I don't think it's a good time to be raising taxes on Minnesotans. I think that we should figure out a way to live within our means. And with $1 billion to work with, I think that this would be a good year to just stay with that and not increase taxes on Minnesotans.
I think we covered most of the specifics on bills related to Hastings, but are there any that perhaps we haven't covered yet that you want to cover to point out that you think Hastings should be aware of?
Yeah, there's one that I had that it's school-linked mental health. This is a bill that came out last year. Last year, the chair of the Education Committee was Jennifer Loon. She had this bill, and it called for $10 million this year and $10 million next year. What school-linked mental health is it provides funding for schools. It's a grant program that the schools can apply for so that they can bring in counselors to help the kids in their schools with mental health issues. Usually the counselors will come into the schools. There are times when the students will go to the counseling center to visit with the counselor. I visited one during our interim week recently at Washburn Resource Center in Minneapolis. They have 3 different locations, and I think it's 123 counselors or something like that. Not all of them with this grant money, but some of them are. And heard about some of the students that are helped with that. And the CEO of the Washburn said he gets calls every week from other schools that say, hey, I hear what you're doing with this school and we need the same services. How can we get in on that? And it just comes down to money. So I had a bill that I had a hearing in the Education Committee this year to provide the $10 million this year and next. It actually got funded in the Health and Human Services bill at a little bit lower amount. And so I had an amendment for the Education Finance Omnibus bill to put that in that bill so that we knew that it was covered. You know, sometimes you have to have the same provision in 2 or 3 bills just and hope that it sticks in at least one of them. That amendment was not accepted. The members of the majority party they liked the project, or they liked the reason for the funding, and they said let's just keep it in the Health and Human Services Committee. They didn't want to bring it over into this bill as well. I would have liked to have seen it in both places. Like I said, it increases the chance that it's going to actually get funded that way. So that's something that I'll continue to follow and continue to work on. But that's something that, you know, if we can teach these kids at an early age how to cope with some of whether it's ADHD, whether it's depression, anxiety, any of those types of issues, help them cope with those and learn the coping skills at a younger age, that's going to help them you know, later on in life and set them up for success as adults.
We are only a few weeks away from the adjournment of session, as it's scheduled now, May 20th, less than a month away. What do you foresee yourself being focused on and working on these last few weeks of the session?
It's going to be more as a group, I think. It's going to be working on the projects that we talked about earlier and making sure that those stay in the bills as those bills move forward. But as a group, it's getting through all of the omnibus bills the first time through, and then likely a second time after they come through conference committee and have changed. And you know, you hear about these omnibus bills, and it's funny because it doesn't matter who's in charge. You know, last session when the Republicans were in charge, the Democrats talked about how evil these omnibus bills were, and now that they're in charge, they're doing the same thing. So I've said before, you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So in fact, I think the Health and Human Services bill is over 1,100 pages. So there's quite a bit of content in there.
Well, for those watching that want to contact you with any questions or stay updated with the legislature up here, how can they get a hold of you? How can they stay in touch?
Send an email, rep.tony.jurgens@house.mn, or call 651-296-3135.
There you go. Well, we look forward to more interviews. I'm sure we'll stay updated and come visit again, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you folks at home for joining us. I'm Tom Wright. We'll see you next time.